Hello everyone and welcome in today's session, IT Performance Measurement using IT Governance Metric. As always, I would like to thank you all for signing up for this webinar. I'm delighted to have you here with us. My name is Erita, the Portfolio Marketing Manager for Continuity, Resilience and Service Management and the PCB organizer of this webinar. This very interesting topic will be presented by Mr. Oladapo Ogundeji. His professional career extends over 18 years of experience focused on enhancing the strategic value of ICT in organizations through process reengineering, strategic planning, and project management for corporation, objective and strategy that address business opportunities and issues. At the end of this webinar, please feel free to submit any question or comments you may have in the chat box of your control panel. Mr. Ogundeji will answer to all your questions accordingly at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention and enjoy this webinar. Please, Mr. Ogundeji, you may start the presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Once again, welcome to this webinar session by PCB. As mentioned, my name is Oladapo Ogundeji, DAPO for short. I'll be talking about IT performance measurement using IT governance metrics. We'll get to see what is IT performance and we'll get to find out more about IT metrics. A little about myself. I'm currently the Chief Technical Officer and Chief Information Security Officer of Digital Jewels, a professional consulting and capacity building organization with a master's and with a first degree. As a result of my consulting activities and my exposure to the environment, I have picked up a few certifications. The body of knowledge is always increasing and expanding, thus my need to often read and of course pass exams. This is the overview of my presentation. We're going to have a summary background of IT governance. We're going to ask ourselves the question, why do we measure? And this talks about the benefits. We're going to ask ourselves, what do we want to measure? This talks about the objective. Then we're going to ask ourselves, how to measure. This speaks to the approach or methodology. Then finally, we're going to ask ourselves when to measure. This talks about the schedule or the timing for measurement. Overview of IT governance. I'm not going to assume so much that everyone understands or knows IT governance, so I've spared some few slides to give a backdrop on IT governance. IT governance talks mainly about alignment between the business and IT. IT governance can be seen as the bridge, the connecting force between IT and the business for the alignment that is expected, for the interaction that is expected. The business has some expectations of IT, and guess what? IT also has some expectation of the business, be it with regards to the resources, be it with regards to the services, the timeliness, appropriateness of services provided, and the business will surely make demand of IT. With regards to IT governance, I will just take a definition that states that IT governance is the formal process of defining the strategy of IT organization and overseeing its execution to achieve the goals of the enterprise. So what it means is that if the enterprise does not have a goal, a direction, it will be tough for IT governance to be in use. A lot of times we see IT in a bit of a chaotic state in organizations, and it could be basically drawn up from the organization not having defined goals that IT can move with. Those defined goals could be in the terms of the visions, the missions, and of course, the right decision framework and mechanisms within the organization. And within this concept, we still have a level of impact from the regulators. The regulators could be the government, could be various bodies within our environment that helps to manage or govern the usage of technology or IT. Why do we need IT governance? Of course, to be able to manage and improve the leverage of technology in business, to be able to also deal with the complexity of our IT environment. The environment is changing, and the dynamism to which it has to reflect, to which IT needs to be able to adapt, it's very, very important. I remember someone giving an analogy of IT being a plane in the air, and you are being told to change components of it mid-up in the air. And those are the things we get to see and face in the IT environment. Of course, issues with fragmented IT infrastructure, trying to cope with legacy, new cutting-edge infrastructure, isolated or silo systems, as we might call them. Communication gaps between the business and IT, either the IT communicating in a format, in a language that bears no semblance to the business. IT is known to be using a lot of 3-4 letter acronyms, and the business seems not to understand that. Then often the increasing outsourcing of IT services. Therefore, you see organizations having some as little as 10, some as many as over 20, 25 service providers. Sometimes we hear about IT costs perceived out of control. IT sometimes is seen as wanting to spend more and more on technologies. Some people call it that IT needs to buy a new set of toys. That's what the business might even call those high-end servers in our data center. As a result of these high-end purchases, it's often with regards to evaluation by the business, the financial aspect, they are trying to mention that the return on investment is marginal. Sometimes there are requests that the business brings and IT is not able to respond as required. And that talks about the flexibility or agility of IT to change. With regards to IT governance, the key 5 areas talks about value delivery, delivering value. It's very important that we have the concept that value is in terms of what the business calls it, not strictly in terms of ones and zeros or packets that IT might be computing. We'll also have to deal with risk management. Often IT is regarded as a double-edged sword. What it means is that it can make and it can mar an organization. So often there is a need to be able to watch both ends of IT so that there are adequate controls and enhancers to be able to deliver the value required. Resource management. It's known that resources are finite. So what it means is that IT needs to be able to juxtapose the limited resources be it in terms of infrastructure, of services, of vendors, and even of human resources or skills available for deployment. Performance measurement, that's actually going to form a key aspect of this presentation because we're talking about IT performance measurement. There we'll be looking at the measurement parameters, the indices for measurement. Strategic alignments are key with regard to IT governance. If there is no fixing of the strategic alignment aspect, then IT may be seen running amiss, therefore not delivering on all the other 4 components that have been mentioned. With regards to the objective of IT, it talks about we being able to align the business objectives along with the IT performance. Often nowadays, it's been said that every boardroom decision can be translated to an IT project. Because of the overwhelming dependence on technology, on IT as a whole, there is a need for a full understanding and grasp of the business by IT professionals. Part of those graphs we'll be looking at the business drivers, the changes in the global economy, the internal environment. It's very, very much important. Of course, the entrustment framework to be able to know what are the dependencies. Also, an understanding of the decision models within the organization. It's very, very key. Then value realization, and of course, performance management and value management. In measuring the performance of IT, one of the key things that could be stated is that there is a need for the measurement framework to be balanced. We'll talk about that even as we move along. Multi-dimensional, because you're going to be looking at various aspects, and at the same time comprehensive enough to cover end to end. In various organizations, you might have a distributed architecture, you might have a centralized architecture, or you might even have a hybrid. There is a need for it to be integrated all along the environment. One of the key things is the selection of the performance measure is very important, because if we are measuring the wrong indices, the wrong KPIs, key performance indicators, it will not allow us to be able to bring about robust decision making, prompt decision making, and even a proactive posture by IT. Of course, there is a need to know who, what, where, and when of measurement. And those are going to form the drive of this particular presentation. In developing effective metrics, some key considerations we have to take in mind. The enterprise strategy. This cannot be overemphasized. The strategy of the organization is very paramount. It helps to set the tone. Then talking about developing metrics that are responsive to the environment. Because the things we might be measuring a year or 2 years ago might have been overtaken by changes and emerging things in that sector. Part of the key things we have to look at is what are the metrics that we can bring about. These are quantifiable values that can easily demonstrate the progress or lack of progress in the organization. Of course, it's very important that whatever metrics is being deployed or being used, there is an ease of implementation. There is no need or advantage in making use of a metrics that the process of attaining or obtaining those metrics becomes another burden on the organization. Then the concept of it is that it must be open to change. With regards to the various frameworks that exist, the framework I will be talking about much more is the COBIT framework. The COBIT is in its 5th iteration, so it's called COBIT 5. It can be used as a basis for setting the organization's objective and also for establishing a performance framework. COBIT has various times over the past years matured to be able to provide very discrete but yet generic metrics that can be used in ascertaining IT performance. These IT objectives, which are often expressed as goals, surely need to be aligned with the enterprise objectives. Why do we measure the benefits? Benefits, of course, there are many, but I'll start with a quote that says, "You cannot effectively manage what you cannot measure." It's very, very key that performance measurements are a key aspect of IT governance and thus helps to determine the performance of IT. Part of the benefits is there is a need to ensure the alignment. You can see the mention of alignment reoccurring because that is a very key and topmost objective in any form of performance measurement. One of the key things we'll be looking at also, we're talking about how you can achieve those strategic objectives. But if you have not built up measurements, then you will surely not know when you are achieving or not achieving those objectives. At the same time, part of the benefits it allows is for you to be able to know how to manage your resources, which I mentioned are finite and limited. Resource allocation, resource planning, and sometimes even for organizations that want to acquire for merging, if I'm not able to evaluate how well the entity, the organization, the unit I'm trying to take over to merge with is performing, then I might actually be casting a shot in the dark. What to measure? Here we'll be talking about the objectives of those measurements. We'll be having objectives that have to do with planning, leadership, governance, resource management, and of course, third parties, which can be referred to as suppliers and partners. With regards to suppliers and partners, because of the dynamic and changing nature of our interactions with third parties, there is a need to be able to accurately, promptly, and comprehensively evaluate our dependencies. There are sometimes that there are even third or fourth layers of dependencies or interdependencies within the organization and the vendors or partners. In trying to achieve that, we will be looking at the continuous improvement, which means that we will not get it perfect in the first swoop, but there is a need to constantly improve. How the decision making is done within the organization. Of course, your societal commitment. It's very, very important that the tone at the top helps to set the direction and the involvement of those performance measurements. We mentioned alignment, and there is a need to focus on the customer. In this, the customer can be of twofold, can be internal customer and the external customers. Within the external customers, we could have them as the shareholders. We could even have them as the regulators. We could have them as the end users, those that will consume the services or products of the IT unit or department concerned. One of the key principles of COBIT-5 talks about meeting the stakeholders' needs. There is a methodology called the goals cascade. This is a format, a way that you can use to derive and more empirically identify the various goals down to enabler goals that drives the key things IT needs to get done. So I'll take right from stakeholders' needs. Stakeholders' needs are varied and diverse. It's pushed down to the enterprise goals. These find its expression in some organizations as the enterprise strategy. So that document that forms the drive of the organization over a year, 3-year, or 5-year period are key in that aspect. From there on, it's cascaded to the IT-related goals. These are specific IT itemized items. COBIT has actually provided generic goals, 17 for enterprise, and also 17 for the IT-related goals. These are seen in the next slides. What has been done is there has been an alignment between the balanced scorecard, which some of us may be familiar with, to be able to derive the 4 components of the balanced scorecard. Looks at the financial, the customer, the internal, and the learning and growth dimension. What COBIT has done, the 5th iteration of COBIT, is to be able to itemize 17 of the IT-related goals and align them with that balanced scorecard dimension. This ensures that we are able to cover the business end to end. So you have to ask yourself, when you are performing those measurements, when you are ascertaining the performance of IT, are you covering these 4 dimensions? A lot of times, people might just be providing performance measurements on some aspect of the goals identified. We'll still talk further on these goals, but it's very important that we look at it both internally and externally to ensure that the output of a particular measurement can be formed as an input into another metrics. how to measure. This talks more on both the approach or the methodology of the measurement. I made mention it uses the balance scorecard, that's COBIT 5. The idea is to be able to translate organization strategy into specific measurable objectives. The acronym I get to use when I'm talking with clients is, of course, the SMART. S for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, R for realistic, T for time bound. People try to set SMART goals, and that's what we're trying to do with regards to those objectives. It allows there to be a measurement balance, and that is a very delicate thing that needs to be done. Sometimes I see organizations where performance measurement is done and there is an overly emphasis on an aspect of the activities in IT. So it might be measuring of a particular availability, and so much metrics is available. But measuring the availability of a vendor services will be different from measuring the availability of people or personnel deployed for a particular project. And that's why there is a need for a measurement balance. And in trying to define the measurement balance, an approach to be able to support, understand the various impacts, broad impact of the IT supporting roles is very much needed. And this can be further refined. So let's take the balance scorecard broken down. Financial, we talk about 5 enterprise goals and 6 IT goals. So an example could be the stakeholder value of business investment. Shareholders, they want to know how much have they invested and what is it yielding. Therefore, the alignment of IT and business strategy must be evident to them. When we're talking about customer, we have to look at what customer orientation do we have. It determines the service culture within the organization. With regards to internal, we will be looking at 5 enterprise goals. And of course, often IT being an internal function, you can see that has the highest amount of IT goals, 7 to be specific. Here we're looking at operational and staff productivity. This, we talk about IT agility, talks about security, talks about optimization of IT assets, talks about the delivery of projects, program on time, within budget, and of course, meeting the requirements and quality expectation. He also talks about availability of reliable and useful information. Then the 7th IT goal talks about IT compliance in tandem with the internal policies that exist. Learning and growth that has 2 enterprise goals and 2 IT goals. They're looking at both the competency of the IT personnel and, of course, the expertise available for business innovation. Out of the scorecard, when we look at it in another view, we'll be looking at both the revenue, the expense, that's looking at the financial, the cash aspect. Then, of course, when you're talking about customer perspective, you're looking at satisfaction, also looking at retention, aspects of market share and brand strength. So with regards to internal perspective, you could be looking at the inventory, the order, resource allocation, and quality controls, learning and growth. Of course, a lot of organizations say their key strength is their personnel, their staff, and that's why the learning and growth perspective is quite important. Employee satisfaction, turnover, skills, and education. And this has actually been fully outlined in this particular slide. I will not go into all the details, but this helps you to easily see the areas of focus for you to have a balanced performance measurement in our environment. These are generic, or what we can call them sample metrics to be used. What we try to do is try to streamline, just using an example. I picked on some few of the IT-related goals. So one talks about IT agility. So you are trying to look at the average time for you to be able to turn an IT objective into an agreed and approved initiative. In some environments, this can be very important. You see a lot of drive, and they have an IT objective agreed. But to be able to turn them into projects, sometimes you could have as long as 3 months, 6 months, even in some areas, over a year to be able to get that approval done. And that surely does not result in an agile IT environment. I'll pick up another one again. 16 talks about competent and motivated IT personnel. We're trying to look at when last have we conducted an IT skills assessment in our organization. Is this something that you do regularly or something you just do ad hoc? So we're trying to find out what is the percentage, the ratio of staff that have the right IT skills to be able to deal with the competencies that's required for their roles. I know an organization that they are migrating to a cloud platform, and yet within the environment, within the technical or IT environment, no one has an understanding, depth enough understanding of the various cloud infrastructure, cloud principles. That is very, very important and key. So there is a need for us to be able to look at all those things and define it. When to measure. If you are measuring at the wrong time, surely you will be getting a wrong input. And as I was taught in school a long while ago, garbage in, garbage out. So if I'm not measuring rightly, then I need to look at it. It might be the timing. So the requirement or expectation is that it should be at a regular interval. Each organization therefore has to sit down to define when are these intervals, when is appropriate. What it means is that there can be a possibility that you will over measure or under measure. But what is required is that we are adaptive and we can tweak and we can update on those schedules. And all the various factors needs to be considered. It is possible that a particular factor will be measured with a different frequency from the other components. And that is very key and important in performing the measurement. When I'm looking at the measurement phases with regard, you'll be asking me, yes, we have talked about the various reasons, benefits. We even talked about the approach. That's where we itemized on the COVID-5 goals cascades and the 17 IT goals. I'll just outline here just phases that we can take in the measurement. First, we establish the performance goals. What exactly is our objective? What is our target? The next thing we should do is perform an assessment of the processes and metrics to determine a current state. This can often be regarded or often called as a gap assessment. We're trying to find out in this particular phase, where are we? Then we now take in the COBIT metrics as key performance indicators and very, very importantly, adapt. I see a lot of organizations, they take the COBIT metrics, which are quite robust, but they do not adapt it, and therefore and it becomes quite cumbersome or burdensome for the organization when they are doing their measure. Then agree the criteria for acceptable performance. So when we are measuring, so let me just take an example. We are measuring the bandwidth provided by internet service provider. When do we take those measurements? Is it at night when there is no load, or is it at daytime, peak periods, so that we can be able to evaluate that the vendor that provided a statement in the contract saying he's providing you a dedicated link is actually providing you a shared, a contention-based bandwidth. Next things are align metrics to the current state of the business. And what state are we? Somebody asked the question, how do we eat an elephant? And the response was bit by bit. What it means is that we have to look at our current state and look at what level we want to measure. Should it be quarterly? How do we want to address? What level? 90%? 99%? Right now, I see a lot of organizations pushing for 99.99%. But the question I'm asking is, do they really need that level of reliability? Have they done a cost-benefit analysis? Then there is a need to report on the status to the business. It's important that it's done at agreed schedule. There is really no value in me providing information when the event has already been overtaken by another event. I'm not helping the business to be responsive or better still proactive in reporting, and it should be to the concerned stakeholders. So a particular organization, they did a survey and they got good feedback from the survey, but they did not communicate the result of the survey, therefore denying the benefits of conducting that survey. Of course, I know there will be constraints, so therefore I have highlighted the constraints. The constraints could be senior management not engaging IT, therefore unwillingness to be involved in the IT decision making. Therefore, risk management, of course, not assessing all the potential threats that could impact. It could be with the vendor, it could be with the internal resources. An assessment is skill assessment, my throw-ups of that. And often you see that there's a bit of fear, apprehension, that, oh, this exercise is just an exercise by the company to downsize. So those could be potential threats. With regard to alignment, talking about the value of it is not in tandem with the business. There are not enough resources. We are trying to do some measurement, but we don't even have enough tools or people to perform those measurements. From this, you can see that there is a need to properly evaluate, and once it's done, we will surely be able to come up with good measurements. It's of course not a job that will be done within a day, but I think with these few information we have obtained in this presentation, we are more better to be able to respond and ensure that we are doing an IT performance measurement that is done with best practice. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogundeji, for this informative webinar. I would like to ask the audience to write your question now while I start reading the first question. Are there major differences between COBIT 4.1 and COBIT 5?
Okay, I will take that. Yes, there are some significant differences between COBIT 4.1 and 5. One of the key things you will easily see is the number of processes. In COBIT 4.1, you have 33 processes. In COBIT 5, you have 37 processes. In COBIT 4.1, you have 4 main domains, which really speaks to management. In COBIT 5, you have a whole new area, which is also a domain that was brought in, which is the governance domain. So those are very significant differences. Even in the nomenclature, in 4.1, you have your APs and EAs. In COBIT 5, you have your APOs and your MEAs, which talks about APO, talks about your aligned, plan, and organize. Your MEA talks about your measurement, evaluation, and assessment, and assess. So there are some significant differences, and I will encourage organizations to translate to COBIT 5, which has actually been out for almost up to about 3 years. So it's already prevalent in the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogundeji, for this answer. Because of the time limitation, we will go with the last question, and the remaining questions will be answered through email by Mr. Ogundeji. One attendee wrote, how is COBIT 5 aligned with the international standards on IT governance?
Okay, that's an interesting question. One of the things that COBIT 5 is quite good in is alignment with other international standards and framework. So I believe when you're talking about the international standard for IT governance, the question is referring more to ISO 38500, which is the standard for IT governance from the ISO organization. There is a lot of alignment. Actually, COBIT built on that ISO standard. So you have a lot of the people that created the COBIT 5 being active on the ISO technical committee to ensure that alignment. So I can easily tell you that there is a lot of fit for 38500 and COBIT 5. What COBIT 5 goes ahead to do, if you look at the 38500, you will see a very small document composed of roughly about 15, 16 pages, because it is pretty high-end document. But COBIT 5 breaks it down into granular activities, into processes, into practices, into activities, into detailed activities, well over 1,100 detailed activities. So I usually tell people you can easily use both together in your organization along with other ISO standards. Thank you.
Mr. Ogundeji, thank you for this excellent presentation, and I want to thank to all of the attendees as well who have joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please be informed that this webinar is recorded and we will upload in our official YouTube channel and in our website pcb.com. Also, we will upload the slides in our SlideShare account in where you can view the slides as well. Once again, thank you and enjoy your day.